It's your third time here. And I'm so
Yes.
excited.
You
We have three different topics that we've talked about. And I
too.
feel like we've gone through this evolution together in our business.
Yes.
And since you and I were talking offline so much about it, we really thought it would be amazing to share this with everyone, why
Mhm.
we feel the way we do about not just our personal health journeys, but our business journeys. Because if anyone can resonate with what we're going to talk about today, I really think it can move someone forward. What do you think?
I agree. I agree. And I especially agree about this evolution. And that's why I'm excited to share because I think it will give your listeners the perspective that we are real, regular women. Even though we're coaches, we continue to grow and evolve. And I think the process is beautiful and only can only benefit our clients.
Yes. And if you've ever learned something new or
Hmm.
found new evidence and changed your mind on something and had to come out and say that, then
Hmm.
you are going to relate today because we have really moved into a space where we're feeling more and more comfortable, I think, because it makes so much more sense with our health to bring in. And I'm just gonna throw it out there. We really have both noticed the emotional side has been,
Absolutely.
yeah, so important for us to look at. But let's step back a little bit because we have your bio, we have your history, and everybody, I'm gonna link up our other episodes just so you can kind of get an idea of some other things that we have talked about and have been learning and helping women with. But where did we meet, Jessica?
We met inside of a class, a coaching program for EFT tapping, emotional freedom technique. And it's been, I'm thinking, 2.5-ish years during the pandemic, going on 3 years. And we decided to kind of talk offline. So we jumped on a Zoom because I just remember thinking, she's a midlife woman like me, but she's so pretty and she's so poised and she's so smart. I need to talk to her because I especially wanted us to connect so that we could do some collaborating like this. So I've been able to get on your podcast. I've had you on my Instagram live before. And so it's a collaboration that worked and is still working.
That's so sweet. I thought the same thing. I was like, this gorgeous woman has it together. And isn't it funny when we get together? I really
Yes.
thought that. And I thought I was just so proud of you with your business. And I am still, we are always in process. But what I think is really fun about you and I is we've paralleled so much,
Yes.
not only in just the way where our business is going, but how we're trying to grow it
Mhm.
also. And our even our messaging is really similar, which is funny because
Yes.
we would you would think in this world that we would be competitors, but we are women who love to share and uplift each other. And we
Mhm.
do have a different tribe. And I really want to I want to go back.
Mhm.
So, your tribe, speaking of your tribe, how did you start attracting women in? What were you looking to teach people? When you first started saying, I'm going to be a health coach, what are the basics, the principles? What were you teaching those women?
Okay, now, Kim, I'm allowed to say this even though it has somewhat transformed or changed over the years, right? I'm
Yes,
not going to be embarrassed because when you know differently, you do differently. Um,
exactly.
Yeah, so starting out, because I got my health coach certification, it's been almost 21 years. And so
Wow.
I had a weight loss story and that losing 65 pounds, but I was in my early 30s then. That was like what pushed me forward to want to help women. And I also felt that as my health coach told me, because I had a health never had heard of a health coach. And I remember her telling me when I asked, well, why is this time going to be any different? Because I was a yo yo dieter, many diets from teenagers to early 30s. She said, well, why don't you become a health coach? And I don't think that a woman has to become a health coach just to be successful, but that resonated at the time. And so that's what I did. And so, my messaging then was if you do my program and allow me to coach you, you will lose the weight. Almost every single person that I worked with lost the weight. Where there was a deficiency in my coaching that I have now, and it took years to really understand this. And of course, in more recent years, EFT tapping has really helped. is that mindset piece, because even if they started implementing those lifestyle changes, which I did, so I was my own walking billboard. 5 years later, 10 years later, people would run into me like, you kept your weight off. But there was a lot of work that I was doing behind the scenes within my that I wasn't teaching my clients to do because I didn't really know how to do it. I just talked about good habits. You need to, do all these things. It's not just about the food and exercise. And I always felt that way. But as far as those habits, just do it. And if you do it for at least 21 days, you'll be good. And we all know that that is not the case now. So I blame it on not knowing any differently, being a lot younger. And of course, with age comes wisdom and a changing body, going through those shifts that I know we talk about quite a bit. So that was what my messaging was back then. And so I apologize and forgive myself. And I hope that some of my clients do too. They were able to see success. And there were quite a few that still kept their weight off, but the messaging was just so different because I wasn't so focused on the mindset or the emotional side of eating, exercise, and lifestyle.
I love how you looped in emotion, not just with eating, to
Mhm.
the exercise and lifestyle, because I think that we do sometimes get so narrowed down either the fitness path or the food path. And I was the
Mhm.
same way. 10 years ago, I came out of my integrative nutrition school, and we were taught somewhat how to coach. We were also taught somewhat how to listen to our clients. I think that if I could take back my first couple years, for
Mhm.
sure, maybe even more, I was a great educator on food. I was a great educator on the pros and cons of things. I was a
Mhm.
great person to come to for, if you wanted research on something. But to actually help a person make decisions and understand
Mhm.
why they were eating, why they wouldn't get off the couch to go walk, why they wouldn't work out, I really struggled because I didn't look, and I was taught this, by the way, I didn't
Mhm.
really take into account every other part of their life.
Yes.
And I think that when you say the lifestyle piece of it, there's so much more to this picture. And yes, I forgive myself. I hope my first couple years of clients, I have one person that I still keep in touch with, and she's a blessing. And she was actually the first person. I can give her so much credit because she was the first client that I had that really was able to open up and felt really comfortable and not judged when she said, this relationship with food, I just
Mm.
cannot seem to be in control or stop obsess. The obsession and the things that I am doing for 3 days and then I just fall off and binge these cycles. So yeah, I had
Good
to have
for
a wake
her.
up call with her. Yes, I had to have a wake up call with her to
Mhm.
realize everybody has a story behind it. And so I'm excited to keep talking about this. One of the things I really want to know is, let's talk about first the statistics of weight gain after doing a diet. What do
I
you think they are
mean,
now? Because they've been just rising. They
mhm.
have to be like 80, 90% now.
Yeah, I
And
was
I
I
didn't
was
even,
thinking that.
yeah,
I'm
I
sorry,
didn't even
that's
bother looking it up because I know in my own clients, that's, all of them are with me because they've never maintained their weight
mhm.
without actually recently, many of them have gone on the weight loss drug and then come for health habit help in between
Okay.
because they may not want to do that forever. So
Mhm.
that's a whole nother conversation. But that is really interesting to me that if 80%, let's just go on the lower end,
Okay.
80% of the people regain their weight, the motivation to do it all over again has to be pretty low.
Is. I mean, failed diet after failed diet after failed diet, which is where I think women, especially, I mean, all people, but women especially, become so attracted to seeing a quick fix, just because at that point, they're already beat down. I mean, they've
Yeah.
already done it, and it takes so much emotional energy. That's the other toll that yo-yo dieting, having to constantly revisit, it takes your energy. So, some maybe haven't given up altogether because as quickly as something that seems easy comes along, even though they know intellectually they know that it probably won't work. It's like just grasping at straws to find some type of resolution to their weight loss journey.
Yes, and I think that
Hmm.
the dieting in general is so ingrained in us. So, ladies, if you've been in that journey, This is not saying you are wrong or you've done anything that you shouldn't do or that there should be any shame around that, because our culture has really
Yes.
brought us up. If you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, you have been brought up with diet after diet after diet. This is the one. This is the one that's going to help you lean out. This is the one where you can eat food and feel good. This is the one where
Yeah.
you're not going to have any stomach issues. This is the one. It's the one every single time, but is it the one for you? I
For
think is what
you.
we're you and I have learned, the
Mhm.
uniqueness of it. But let's talk about those emotional barriers, because I think what you and I figured out is, even in our own story, and you from the very beginning have talked about mindset since I met you. And mindset has so many different factors. Let's just pick one. Like, let's talk about just, even when I say emotional issues, like, what about just motivation to get off the couch? What do you think could possibly be causing someone to not make that change, even though they showed up for coaching, they wanted it, they said they wanted it? What's holding them back possibly?
There are so many different nuances to what it could be, but I'll just speak to what my experience is in a general sense. Upbringing and culture. So it's not that a person was raised to be a couch potato, or that they were raised in an environment where people were lazy and didn't work. But still, depending on how you're raised, because I run into this often, maybe exercise just wasn't a priority. Or if everyone in the family is overweight, then that is just accepted. So in their mind, they're just what those the negative habits, I would say for instance, not being able to get off the couch, that might even be looked at as a reward for hard work, because that's what your mother or father did when they came in after a hard day at work. And I say that to say they may not even really in their mind be relating it to the fact that this is why they struggle with making healthy choices with their food or getting up off the couch to exercise. And so then they beat themselves up thinking that it's just about lack of willpower or lack of discipline, when really there's something else. Another facet of that is just the fear of what that would look like for them, and especially if they're the only one in the house that's doing it. So let's say we're back to the scenario of I'm sitting on the couch, but my family and they're all sitting on the couch with me, and if I get up to do what I've committed to do, then I'm going to leave them. And now this might even judge the type of mother that I am. Or maybe I'm not a good wife because my husband really wants to spend that time with me. So I'm really doing this, taking this course of action because I love my family so much. And that's where it's like, it is so fascinating to me, because it can take some time to peel back all those layers. But to me, it should give women hope that if you can get to the bottom of why you're making those decisions, that's a good thing, because you're not lazy. You don't just lack willpower. You have it all in you. We just got to figure out how to uncover and get through some of that trauma to get to that.
Yes. And I'm going to add to that before we get to the trauma. I think that women for a long time have really had a hard time investing in themselves, especially if they were mothers. That was an identity. I remember running with a friend, had a little bit of time before picking up the kids that were in after school, and I was a single
Mhm.
mom at the time. You know how that
Mhm.
goes.
We
And
know,
I
yes.
was, yeah, I was just running with a friend right before I picked them up, and we went a little long, and I was a little panicky. And I remember saying, "Hey, you can have this time once in a while too. Have you done this at all this week?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "They're probably having fun and playing. It's okay to invest in you." And when
Mhm.
he said invest in you, that has stuck with me forever. And I want to go back to something else you mentioned about those limiting beliefs about getting up and exercising because of maybe your past or
Mhm.
something that's happened to you. And it reminds me of worked with who was very embarrassed to do anything new in front of people. Something had happened to her when she was a child, and she tried a new sport, and everyone made fun of her, and she was not good. So this is something that we often have trouble with, is we
Yeah.
walk in and think we should know how to use every piece of equipment in the gym. We should know exactly what we're supposed to do. And that's why we have coaches, by the way, a
Mhm.
lot of help out there. But she was so
Mm.
afraid of being embarrassed that there were even new hobbies that she wouldn't try. because of that embarrassment. And it all linked back to childhood, which, by the way, is a little bit of a trauma
That
there.
is. That is. I'm glad you said that just because I can relate to having felt that way too. Not as much in even other areas of my life as I've gotten older, because it's something about being in your 50s. But just that fear of what others will think of me, especially if I don't know what I'm doing. And especially when it comes to exercise. I remember going through that when I decided to join a gym some years ago, and I eventually got past it and could care less. And people were reaching out to me about gym outfits and being ambassadors and all of that to look cute at the gym. I don't even care anymore. I don't care what I look like at the gym. But it did take some time to evolve to that.
Yeah, I think that it takes time for everyone. And when
Hmm.
people see someone doing it, they forget that they were a beginner.
Right.
Somewhere along the line, we were all beginners, even with food, because I was thinking about this the other day because I still have a 20-year-old in the house. Just looking at his food choices, it just, as a health coach, it breaks your heart a little bit
Yes.
to watch all the processed food, all the sugar. But what was hitting me is I did the same thing, and we don't know until we know.
Right.
And if you're out there and you're trying to figure all this out, you don't know until you know. The shame and the guilt comes in when you know and you're not
Hmm.
able to make those changes. And I would love to delve into really quick the weight loss part of this too.
Hmm.
There's an emotional part of changing your body also. I think there's an emotional part of maybe it's letting go, maybe it's just letting yourself get to that point, grieving your younger body. What do you think are some of the emotions that women feel when you're trying to help them lose weight?
As badly as many women want to lose weight, I mean, and I mean desperately, there's a fear about how people are going to perceive them if they lose weight. Which is so crazy. And I can relate to that thinking back all those years ago, trying on jeans and being like blown away that I was in a smaller size. And I would wear bigger clothes. And my friends are like, why are you doing that? And I just couldn't believe that I had lost weight. And I felt uncomfortable now with the weight loss, even though that was what I wanted so desperately. So there's this thing with our emotions and our comfort level, and then body image. How we perceive we are supposed to look, maybe at a certain age or with what we've been through. So it's like the head tells us this is what we need to do, but there's a fear of what we perceive, because it's just a perception. It's not the reality, but a fear of what we perceive comes with that, as if there's this heavy responsibility that comes with losing weight. And then the last thing I would say is there's the fear of maintaining it. And because there have been so many disappointments in a woman's life, then you just don't want that embarrassment again of losing, and when she's going to gain that weight back. Now, the reality is there's not a lot of people that are really thinking about us in that way. People are really going about their own lives, but we think that that's what people are going to say. And so it's a love-hate battle, I think, within women about, I need to lose the weight, especially for my health. I need to lose the weight because I want to look a certain way in my clothes, but I'm afraid to lose the weight because then I'll look a certain way in my clothes. It's that just is what really helps me to see how much of an emotional journey this is when it comes to weight loss, and especially in midlife women.
That's so true. I think that we are always looking for the worst outcome so that we're not disappointed. And I think the weight loss journey is the question always that is asked of me when we have a consultation is, I'm sure you get this too, what's going to be different? What's different about this? And again, it's because we're talking about the deeper, darker, emotional stuff. And I want to go back to when you lose weight and the wearing the bigger clothes. It's interesting how I do think there's a bias. I do think there's an invisibility to women who are overweight. I do think that they are not necessarily always treated the same way. It is it's sad. And I think
Hmm.
that some of that weight sometimes is also because there's a wall up and they don't want to be seen, and
Say.
losing the weight, safety. We always want to belong. We always want to feel safe in our bodies. And when we lose it, then we're seen. We're really being seen.
Mhm.
And it's a no-win situation until we get our heart and our head straight,
Straight.
really.
100% agree with that.
Yeah. And it's interesting too because when we talk about the beginning process of losing weight, there's always the why. And the why, if it's just for image, we know that
Mhm.
it doesn't work out
Doesn't
well.
work.
No. So we mentioned the word trauma a couple times,
Yes.
and I wanted to share something that in coaching we had to do that was really interesting. We had to go through every year of our life and tap. And for those of you who don't know what tapping is, it is emotional freedom technique. It is an amazing tool and technique that Jessica and I use in coaching and on ourselves.
Yes.
And our coach uses it with us. We have a coach
We
too
have a
because that's
coach.
very important.
Yes.
And it helps release tension and stress, but also the things that we're dealing with, we start to heal this trauma. And what was interesting is we had to go through every year, and I kept thinking, why would what would be going on when I was in my mom's, womb? What would be going on in my first or second or third year of life? And I wanted to share this in case anybody wanted to really dig a little deeper
Mhm.
into their story. My mom and dad got pregnant. Everybody knows, so I can say this. My mom and dad got pregnant before they got married. And in 1966, that was a serious no-no.
Mhm.
That was a tough time to have that happen. So in some ways, when I found that out, I of course had this. I didn't find out till I was like 9 and did the math. I'm always the math girl, love the
Mhm.
numbers, and figured it all out with the months. When I found out when they got married, and my
Yeah.
parents are like, "Oh no, here we gotta talk about this."
Uh-huh.
But it was the feeling of, oh, I wasn't really wanted. I was in
Mm.
accident. Then the stress of knowing that my parents, the stress that they were going through. And then the stress of my father going into the Marine Corps and my mom being left many times when I was young. And at one point, Vietnam, and then he was stationed in Okinawa. And so as I went through, I realized these things that I thought were happening to my parents were
Mhm.
also happening to me. And there's this constant theme in my life, and I'm going to be really open about this right now. A little bit of abandonment, but that was also passed down because of, I know other stories in my family where I think I also just absorbed it. And the reason why I bring that up is because through tapping, I can work on that because
Mhm.
that theme that comes up, because remember what we just said, feeling safe anywhere in anybody was
Mhm.
really not that possible for me. It didn't matter if I was 5 pounds overweight, if I was my goal weight, if I was underweight, if I was pregnant weight, if I was menopause weight. If I didn't start dealing with that, it didn't matter. I wasn't going to feel safe in anybody.
Mhm.
So, is there anything that you can recall that made you think, I need to tap on this because it might relate to some of my journey?
Yes, absolutely. And I want to preface it with the point that you made that our coach told us that even if we couldn't remember back that far, or if there was a stage, let's say ages 3 and 4, and I don't remember that, use even the stories that you were told about that stage of your life and the journey, this trauma releasing process was just as effective. But what was interesting as I went through it, some of those ages that I thought I didn't remember anything, you just have these flashbacks of things. And those flashbacks of things are what's in your subconscious that is dictating the decisions you make all these years later. So one of the things that came to me in that process, especially as it related to how I view food, because I still have to work on how I view food. I won't say it's the worst struggle because now I have the tools, but I have to I have to make choices every single day, okay? Because I love candy. I don't just love all sweets, but I love candy, okay, and a few other things, okay. So my grandmother, my father's mother, didn't have much money, and so and then of course there's the way that she was raised. I never met my great grandmother, but her way of compensating or rewarding for doing very hard work. So first of all, she was very demanding, and required a lot of hard labor from her kids. And so those are her kids. That's what she did. So as we all came along as grandchildren, she in a way required that of us. And I can remember that there were times where I just didn't want to go. I knew she loved us, but it was like she just made us work a lot. But the one thing that made it okay was that she rewarded us with sweets. She would bake pies and have cans of Sprite that stayed under the kitchen counter, and they'd be warm, Kim. But that was our treat. And we'd be sitting there as grandkids drinking that warm Sprite after working all day. Because it's interesting because my dad and I had that conversation about 2 years ago. My grandmother's been gone for many years. My dad is 80 now. Child's role or grandchild's role in a grandparent's life and how much support should or should not be there. So we had to really talk some things out. But when your entire reward system or payment system, especially for hard work, is based on food and non-nutritious foods. So if we weren't eating candy, then she would reward us with hot dogs. So you just, I didn't even like hot dogs and ate hot dogs, my whole life because that was just part of. So it wasn't that it always brought back the most fond memories. Sometimes you do things on autopilot. So fast forward to now in my house when I'm a young person growing up with my parents, my dad wanted some form of dessert every night. And I can remember him being so desperate where he's like calling my mom, honey, did you even eat yogurt down there? And he would be in the kitchen with yogurt, fruit flavored yogurt and ice cream, mixing it up in the blender himself to make a shake because he just had to have something. That was his upbringing. So there were a lot of traumas for me around that whole thing with my grandmother, the work that she required us to do, how she rewarded us. And so those are things that still became part of me. So I said that to say that may not sound like the biggest trauma, but traumas like that even spill over into how you view money and how you view money and food. Even what you spend your money on in relation to food is a whole thing. So yes, all of that is something that came to the surface for me when I started EFT tapping that really helped me to try to get a hold on this emotional side and that there are other ways to reward myself and that if I use something other than sweets, that didn't mean that I didn't work hard.
That hit a lot of nerves. And you just mentioned money. Growing up and having those environmental factors around money, how your parents treated money, how your grandparents treated money, whether they talked about it or not, there were so many things that weren't talked about and that I had to learn the hard way. The situation with the candy and the sweets, when I was a single mom, I remember one night I was just really, really needing something. I was really, as my kids back in the day would be like, I was jonesing for some chocolate. So I was in my pajama pants before it became popular to walk out in your pajama pants. And I just went to the gas station. My kids were with their dad. I think I was kind of lonely. And I got my king size Hershey bar. And back then, this is really crazy because back then they were huge. Nowadays, king size is like the regular
Size. Yeah.
really. But I was talking to my mom one day and I was like, hey, I don't even like fancy chocolates. Like, when people leave me like with, Godivas and stuff like that, I'm like, I just want a Hershey. She's like, well, you know why that happened? And I was like, what are you talking about? Why that happened? She said, well, I gave you Hershey bars all the time because my dad was a traveling salesman before he had passed away very young in her life, a traveling salesperson, and he would bring them back because he was gone and would bring them back to her from the trip. And that just was like trickled down. And to this day, I will crave a Hershey bar whenever anything's going wrong, anything's not feeling right. I have a little bit of just messy feelings, messy emotions that I can't quite resolve, then that's exactly what I want. So I hear you.
When you said that. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I think one of the things that I find fascinating too is women, we have this dichotomy going on, and I hope I'm using that word correctly. On one hand, women our age were raised to be very independent and self-sufficient. I remember my mom, after her divorce, which is another trauma in my teens, but my mom saying, you need to be able to take care of yourself, have a job, be self-sufficient. And then On the other side of it, we grew up being very people pleasing, not so great with boundaries because of
Mhm.
some of the environmental things where we had these expectations that we had to meet and we had to avoid that conflict. So, are you seeing that with your clients or with yourself too? That some of those factors are playing into the inability to stay on track.
Yes, and that was the right way to use it as far as I know, the dichotomy, because it's so interesting that this is the phase of life that everybody talks about that we just don't take no stuff. Like, 40 is like I have arrived when I'm 40. Don't get 50. I mean, it's like no one can tell me anything. But there are all these midlife women out there that have not set the boundaries for various reasons. I think some of it may go back to the fear that we talked about, the people pleasing, and that if I do this, I'm going to be perceived a certain way. And then that, of course, then ends up translating to or spilling over into the decisions about their health. And so that's why, we in the coaching community, we use the word empowerment a lot because women need to be empowered. You are that strong woman. You really are her who doesn't have to take any stuff off of anybody. You just have to know and have that confidence that you can do that without repercussions, without retribution. And if there is, you can handle it because you're a midlife woman. We can handle anything. Look at all the other things that we've been through. But that definitely does play a role, even in how a woman views and goes about her health and weight loss journey, for sure.
Yes, I think that the people pleasing part and not setting
Mhm.
boundaries also can create some resentment that we don't even realize we have. We have this need to like almost blame the situation when in actuality we didn't control the situation, and that leads us to making choices of eating more, skipping the workout because we have emotions that need to be processed. And we have, of course, I always tell everybody just walk anyway. Walk it
Mhm.
out because that will process emotions. I'm always so amazed at what exercise can do. We talk a lot
Yes.
about the tapping and the emotional, but exercise is really a mental health situation also. And just getting out the door. And I think this is a whole nother part of the emotional journey of getting off the couch. We expect so much of ourselves some days. We expect to be on point every single day. Like, I'm going to do my 3 days of lifting, my 3 days of walking 5 miles. If you can only get out the door and just do what you can do, I think you would be amazed at what else will happen after that. It's
Mhm.
this weight that stays on us of perfectionism. We got to be all things to all people, including ourselves. And if I'm not going to be able to do it all today, then I'm not doing
Not
it
do
all.
it. Yeah, and that perfectionism, also is so akin to the all or nothing mentality. I mean, pretty much the same thing. And that's why, when I'm talking to women, it's like, what is sustainable for you? And for right now at least, if sustainable means I can't do strength training because my head's not there or whatever the reason, I can't do that 4 days a week. Well, what can you do? And if right now all you can do is walk, to your point, that's what we're going to work on. And then we can get there. We can get there. But if a woman has no intention of ever doing strength training, like ever, and I haven't met anyone who said that yet, but then why start her on that path? Now, I do believe that if she starts something, she's going to enjoy it. But my point is, it needs to be sustainable and there needs to be that room for the imperfection. So I hear a lot, I don't know your thoughts on this, Kim, but I hear a lot in the coaching, even in fitness and nutrition, at least 80% of the time. And I like to use that. I want them to go in with the concept that at least 80% of the time, if you can stick with what you've committed to, that's a win. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
like kind of meeting her at her perfection level, but it's not perfection because none of us are perfect. We cannot do it perfect all the time or every day. So that's like a little Jedi mind trick that seems to help because then you don't have all of that guilt and shame if you don't follow through.
Well, it's funny you said that. I'm going to grab my phone for a second and go to the calculator. And this is what I do sometimes with my clients. And I'm a numbers girl. I love
Mhm.
this stuff. So let's say we have 21 meals and three of them are just trash. Three of them are just trash and you end up with 18 meals that are okay. So I stick that in my calculator. That's still 86%. You still got another meal that like something happens, you're on the road, things aren't going well. So I love that you said that because 80% is hard for people to imagine, but
Mhm.
80% goes to so many things in our life. One of my really good friends, Laura Heflin, has been on the podcast, and she said, you know what? At this age, I'm okay getting a B. I don't need an A anymore.
Yes,
And I was like,
absolutely.
amen.
Man, and I love those numbers you use. I'm going to use that
Yes, if
because
you, it's truth. It is
easier to
evidence.
visualize. Yes,
Yes. And
yes.
because I'll say to people, I'd love for you to stop when you're 80% full. How do we do that? How do we know that? But if you stop halfway through and you take a little bit of a gauge, 1 to 10, how full am I? You have a chance to slow down and make that choice. So
That's so true.
if you are a numbers person, if you're that person that likes to track stuff, it's fun. It's just kind of fun to throw those numbers in there. But I
Mm-hmm.
love how you said that because 80% is not 100%. We just, yeah, it's too much.
It's too much.
It's too
Yeah.
much because we can't be 100% in every part of our life. And that's what I think you and I, Jessica, are trying to say is there's so many parts of our lives that we're not giving credit to in the health journey, even
Mm-hmm.
relationships. I'll have someone come in and they sit on the couch and we're supposed to be talking about their wins for the week on how they might have, taken care of themselves and coped without food, or how they got out with their walking routine, or they got to the gym, but they just had a big fight with their husband. There's no conversation
Right.
around food and exercise that is going to sink in if we're not addressing that conversation first.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you feel about looking at things like also relationships in their life and connections?
I think that's important too, whether it is from the upbringing, childhood, high school, marriages, and ending of marriages. I've been through a divorce as well, been a single mom, remarriages, relationships with kids, all of that. And that's why it truly is a journey. That's why you cannot do this in 30 days. I mean, you cannot do this in a sustainable way because it does take time, which is interesting because, when a person hires a coach, I hope you don't mind me going here with this, Kim, but they hire a coach and it's like, well, how long will we work together? And if I'm doing one-on-one coaching and they really want to make some changes, the minimum is 12 weeks,
Yes.
a program. But those who have chosen to work with me longer end up having better weight loss results because this way we're not spending all of our time on what to eat and how to exercise. We're literally having certain sessions that are solely on these other parts of their lives, relationships. If you have to fix a relationship with a sibling because you all don't see your parents the same way, and this happens a lot, it's like y'all are in the same house, but for some reason, the lens with which you live through is totally different. All of that goes back to some of the scenarios we mentioned earlier that relate to food or body image or exercise or lack of exercise. And so it's wellness. I mean, wellness is so broad in general, but I understand why we say wellness because your emotional and mental wellness and health directly affects your physical health for the good or the bad. And so you can't really, it's almost like a doctor in a sense. We're not, but as coaches, you can't really treat one without the other and expect sustainable results. I'll put it that way. Expect sustainable results. And I know that all coaches do not offer a lot of that deep work that we do, but I'm just so thankful that we came across this opportunity even with our connection because it's moving the needle with our clients. I know for me it has been a game changer. I did the best I could before I knew about just how important this emotional connection was and being able to use EFT tapping, but it really has made a change in the way clients maintain their weight because they have been vulnerable enough to be able to be okay working on these other things, including relationships.
Absolutely. I think it is so important to be on that journey with them too,
Mhm.
because sometimes they're not getting the emotional support elsewhere. I'm very blessed to own a practice with two therapists. So I do, have the clients that will be with a therapist and be with me. So I have such a great setup. But the
Mhm.
people who are outside of this environment that I coach, sometimes the only sounding board they have is you because they're not going to someplace else. And it's interesting, I have a client, as much as I mostly work with women, I worked with a man who was going through a very tough time throughout his process, like you said, everybody wants to know, when can I do this? Because that's a diet, right? That's a diet.
Hmm.
In 30 days, you're going to be 10 pounds lighter. I was straight up and I said, I don't know how long this will take, but I do know you can make changes. And these changes are going to spark more changes, but they're not going to be what you're used to. And throughout, it's been 2 years now. And in the first year to year and a half, 70 pounds have come off.
Good.
And it's been 2 years and we've been at a plateau. And I say we because I'm in the journey with him. But
Yes.
I keep trying to say, you do not understand how absolutely amazing this is. You have
Yes.
never gone back up. And I even asked him, I said, hey, what are the reasons that you think this is working as opposed to what you've done before? And he said, I've just been taught how to slow down, be mindful, take care of myself, reduce stress. And those are not things that are part of a straight up diet that you're going to buy online or
Yes.
the
Wow.
and I'm not against people counting macros, calories, doing your BMR, TDE, all of that, if that's something you want to do. But don't forget the other piece. Don't forget
Hmm.
all these other little parts of the circle.
Hmm.
And I love everything you mentioned. I feel like the one thing that you brought up earlier that I just want to bring up one more time is fear. I think all of the traumas and all of and I'm not a mental health counselor
Me
just because I
either.
practically live with them. Yeah, but we do know that fear is what is holding so many people back, and we can tap our way out of that and choose the
Hmm.
peace. And if
Hmm.
you haven't seen tapping before, reach out to either Jessica or me, and we can help you learn how to do tapping,
Hmm.
because it is something it looks so different, but people are so much relief from it. And we've been doing it for a long time. I have to actually remind myself because,
Yes.
again, it's a health habit. I do it with
Mhm.
other people and I get that benefit. For example, when I
Yes.
say get the benefit, when Jessica and I were in the class together, let's say our coach was tapping with her, I would be tapping off to the side and doing the same script that he was doing with her, and I would
Hmm.
get the benefits. I would come out of that so relaxed and so much more comfortable and choosing peace. It seems like that always seems to be my mantra when I'm tapping is peace.
Trying to reach just I'm safe.
I'm
Allowing
safe.
myself to be safe. My body is safe. Whatever the emotions are that could be raging, even depending on the anxiety level, I'm safe.
I'm okay and I'm enough. I'm enough just because I exist. I don't have to be enough to live up to something that somebody else in the past told me I had to do. I am enough.
All right.
Well, that is a beautiful way for us to round this out. Jessica, I would love for you to first just share any thoughts that you have for women who are in this age range. They're really looking around to try to figure out what their next step is. What
Mhm.
are a couple tips of things that they can look at in their life, even if it's stuff that we've mentioned before, just to get started on this journey without just looking at food?
I would say, first of all, look at what is sustainable. If it's something, whether it's food or exercise or anything else, that you just cannot see yourself doing from now on. Now, there should be some leeway in there to make good decisions about what you eat, and you should be exercising. I mean, those are the shoulds. But however, if 5 to 6 days of cardio a week does not feel good to you, then let's not do that solely for the reason of losing weight. Okay, because the moment that you stop doing that, then the weight is going to come back. That's why I feel so strongly about strict dieting. You do need to make some modifications if you want to lose weight. Just speaking strictly about food, we all know that we can't eat cookies and ice cream every day and lose weight. But at the same time, strict dieting doesn't work. So my thing is, let's start with what's sustainable and make small changes over time. Drinking water, adding in more fruits and vegetables before we start eliminating things if you struggle with that. And then the other thing, so that's a concept in itself. What is sustainable and just getting started. But the other thing I want to say, and it goes back to what you were saying about if a person wants to count macros, count calories, get on the scale. I talk a lot about that in my content, and it's not to condemn any woman that does that. If you feel safe doing that, then do that. But it underscores It underscores what my concern sometimes is as a coach. You're doing it because you feel safe, not because it works. Because if it worked, we would not be here today. And I don't want to sound insulting or flippant in saying that. But some of the things that you mentioned as we just went down the list, those are things that we see younger women doing. But if counting macros and getting on that scale every day is that motivation that you need, and because I have women tell me that. I mean, that last post I did about the scale, I mean, some women came for me, Kim. They came for me about, well, that has been good for me. And if you have done that and you are at your goal weight and maintaining it, then I'm happy. But generally that is not the outcome. So it goes back to safety, and fear. We get afraid to do something different, even though we do the same thing over and over and over that isn't working. So I would tell someone who really wants to make a change on this journey to weight loss and better health, do something different. Just don't keep doing the things that are not working. And usually something different entails getting to the root cause, addressing the underlying emotions, working through processing, releasing those, and then the weight loss will come. Or in some cases, as the weight loss may come even more slowly, there is such a peace and harmony now that the weight loss isn't even a concern anymore. It's like not even a big deal. And I think it's beautiful when a woman gets to that point where she's comfortable where she is, because then she can more effectively lose her weight.
That is great. I could not have said that any better. Thank you so much, Jessica. I so appreciate you coming back, always giving us such amazing words of wisdom, but just also thank you for opening up today. I'd love for you to tell everyone, where can they find you?
And thank you for having me, Kim, and thank you for opening up too. I just feel so connected. Thank you. Okay, so you can find me on Instagram at I am_Jessica Mitchell. You can also find me on Facebook at I am Jessica Mitchell. And then my website is IamJessicaMitchell.com. So you can find me there, and it's got all of my offerings, a couple of things that are free to just get you started. And you'll just see kind of the theme throughout is more about emotions and lifestyle than just dieting.
And we'll have all that in the show notes. So thank you again. You are definitely taking care of the women that are coming to you, and you're so compassionate and knowledgeable, and I appreciate you.
Appreciate you too, Kim. Thanks again for having me again. I appreciate being here.
Thank you. And for all the listeners, again, nourish your entire life and make sure you give yourself some grace today.